The next function on our list is the explode. So in a search, we are going to type explode. There we go. And what it does is simply splits a string by a string. And it returns an array. We are passing the first argument as a string, which is a delimiter. Then we have a string which we want to split. And optionally, we can apply the limit as the third argument. And it says that it returns an array of strings, each of which is a substring of string, the main one, formed by splitting it on boundaries formed by the delimiter. And then we have obviously the argument, which is delimiter. Then we have a string and a limit. And limit tells us that if limit is set to n positive, the returned array will contain a maximum of limit elements with the last element containing the rest of the string. And we will go through this in just a moment as well. Then we have, if the limit parameter is negative, all components except the last limit minus limit are returned. Again, we are going to play with this as well. And then we have, if the limit parameter is 0, then this is treated as 1. So if we just go back to our editor, and we are going to start with the string variable, and we associate some string with it. And let's make it say me, you, them, for instance. And now what I'm going to do is create another variable, call it exploded, equals, and I'm going to use this explode function. There we go. And I'm passing the delimiter. I want the delimiter to be the /. So basically, our array will contain all these elements that are in between the /. So we have delimiter and then the string, so string. And as you know, as you've seen, obviously the third argument is optional, so we are going to leave it off for now. And what I'm going to do is simply echo, and I'm going to use pre-tags, and then print a, and we pass in this exploded variable, and then echo closing pre-tag to nicely format it in the browser. Okay, if we go and preview everything in the browser, refresh the page, and there we go, me, you, them. As you can see, if we go back to the editor, this delimiter basically, which is obviously placed twice in our string and separates all these items, obviously allowed us to split them into separate items, creating the array of this obviously string. Now, if we try and use the third argument, let's start first with integer 1. So if I save this, preview everything in the browser, refresh the page, and there we go. Everything has been put in just one item of the array. Now if you go back and change it to 2, save it, preview it in the browser, refresh the page, now we have 2 items in the array. The first one is obviously what we got after splitting the string with this delimiter. The second one contains everything else that remained actually out of the string. If we go back to the editor, obviously if we do 3, then we're going to have 3 items of the array, which is what we have in obviously in this string without actually any other third argument basically applied to it. Now, if we try and put the negative number, let's say -1, if we save it and preview in a browser, and there we go, everything is returned apart from the last item after the explode has been applied. If we go back, if we do -2, so the last 2 items will not be returned, only the first one, obviously in this case, because we have only 3 items in the array, and so on. So as you can see, you can obviously easily create an array out of the string based on what sort of delimiter you're going to use. Now let's try and use this 0 as well, which was the third option. And there we go, 0 only returns 1 item. So basically the whole string as one array item still creates an array, but rather than splitting the entire string, obviously it puts it as a value of the index 0 of this array. Okay, now if we want to change it, let's change this to, let's say, colon, and you'll see that it's going to work the same way. So we can obviously use any delimiter that we want. If we save it, preview it in the browser, there we go. Same thing if I remove the third argument and just let it create the array automatically, there we go. So that's how it works. Basically, explode allows us to create an array out of a string by using this specific delimiter. Before we move to the next function, I just wanted to quickly go back to this explode page. you can see the note there. Although implode can, for historical reasons, accept its parameters in either order, explode cannot. And implode is the function we're going to be discussing right after. You must ensure that the delimiter argument comes before the string argument. So the order of the arguments is important here for this explode function. And then we have return values. We know that it returns an array of strings created by splitting the string parameter on boundaries formed by the delimiter. We've been playing with this, we know what it does. And then we have if delimiter is an empty string, as you can see it's just two double quotes, nothing in between, then explode will return false. And well, I'm not quite sure if that's what it does. So if we go back to the editor and let's quickly try this. I'm going to comment these 3 lines here, which are actually returning the array, the printing the array in the browser, and I'm going to put it back with the forward slashes. And for now, I'm just going to basically remove the delimiter, just pass an empty string to it. So it says that it should return false, but what I'm going to get is actually a warning. Have a look at this warning: explode empty delimiter in users Sebastian desktop blah 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 on line 5. So we know exactly where it's pointing. It's pointing to this line. So it means that obviously this empty string, rather than returning false, has actually caused an error that returned the warning. So it does, documentation says it returns false, but as you can see, it depends. I suppose it depends on your obviously configuration of your server as well. In my case, it simply throws a warning. Okay, so that's one of the things. Then we have if delimiter contains a value that is not contained in a string and a negative limit is used, then an empty array will be returned. Otherwise, an array containing string will be returned. Let's quickly have a look at this as well. So say we have forward slashes and I'm going to use colon, and then I'm going to use negative, let's say -1 as the third argument, the limit. If we go back to the browser, refresh the page, and there we go, nothing has been returned. Actually, I haven't actually printed anything in the browser. So if I just save it now, after uncommenting it, refresh the page, as you can see, an empty array has been returned. If I'm going to remove this third argument, then we should have one item in the array with the full string, basically, because obviously delimiter couldn't be found in this string to obviously divide it into the separate items of the array. So that's pretty much everything about the explode. Let's move to the implode now. So now implode function. In a search, we type implode. And if we go to the documentation for this function, implode joins array elements with a string. And then we have a description. As you can see, we've got 2 examples of usage basically. So we can use it either with a glue, which is a string coming as a first argument, then array of pieces, or we can just use the array of pieces without the glue, in which case the piece is obviously going to come as a first argument. Join array elements with a glue string. And then we have a note: implode can, for historical reasons, accept its parameters in either order, which is what we read obviously when we were on the explode documentation page. For consistency with explode, however, it may be less confusing to use the documented order of arguments. What that means basically is that you can have a glue as a second argument and pieces as the first one, should you wish to. But as it says obviously here, for consistency with explode, which takes the delimiter as a first argument and array basically of items, the string as a second argument, let's keep it this way, probably better. So you've got glue as a first one and pieces as a second one. And then we have parameters glue defaults to an empty string. So if you don't provide the glue, as you can see, the second argument only comes with the pieces with the array, then all these pieces will be joined together with an empty string. And then we have pieces, the array of strings to implode. And then we have return values returns a string containing a string representation of all the array elements in the same order, with the glue string between each element. Let's quickly have a look at the example in our editor. So if we go and create the array, let's say exploded array, which contains semicolon obviously at the end, and I'm going to put the banana, then we're going to have apple, and then we're going to have peach. There we go. So this is our array of the elements, and now I'm going to create a variable called imploded, and I'm going to associate this implode function with it. And as a delimiter, as a glue in this case for implode, obviously I'm going to use the /, and then I'm passing the array obviously which I've created right before this imploded variable. And now I'm just going to echo this imploded because it's going to return a string. I can obviously echo it in the browser. If we go back to the browser, refresh the page, and there we go, banana, apple, peach, all joined with obviously the glue which I've specified as a first argument. If I was to omit this argument, the first argument, the glue, and only pass through an array, everything's going to be joined with an empty string. Obviously there will be no space in between these items. So that's how Implode works. That's pretty much everything that Implode does. We can obviously use any sort of glue that we want. We can have a space, let's say I'll have a comma, space, or whatever you want basically. So in this case, as you can see, that my glue here is in between a single quote, comma right after the element, then a space. Next item obviously will be again joined the same way. So if we save it, preview it in the browser, refresh the page, and there we go. If we want, we can also use HTML tags. Let's say I want to join it with the new line BR tag. Now refresh the page. As you can see, every single one is on a new line. And if I preview the source of this element, inspect element, here you'll see that if I just go back, the BR obviously tags have been added, obviously have been used as a glue between these items. So that's pretty much everything about the Implode. Let's move to the next video.